In a big victory for Republican Governor Scott Walker, the Wisconsin Supreme Court last week upheld a controversial new law that limits collective bargaining rights for state employees. Passed by GOP legislators and signed by the governor in March, the so-called budget repair bill led to weeks of angry union-led protests that left Walker's approval ratings in the low 40s, and 6 Republican state senators facing recall elections later this summer. I spoke with Governor Walker earlier and asked him what, if anything, he would have done differently.
I think the biggest thing, if I had time to do it back again, would be to try and spend more time up front articulating exactly why we're doing this. It wasn't just about the budget savings, certainly wasn't about temporary budget savings. It was about long-term structural changes that allow not only the state government but local governments, particularly school districts, to be able to balance the budget. The other big thing that I think even now, you guys talked about a little bit in the pages of the Wall Street Journal, but very few other media outlets have talked about the reforms that will allow us to put the best and the brightest in our schools and our other local governments. Things that right now are dictated by seniority and union contract instead can be done by merit and ultimately paying for performance. That's going to make our schools and our governments better.
So ultimately, local school districts can now do away with teacher tenure. What about teacher evaluation systems? You know, some of the reforms that Chris Christie in New Jersey has proposed, Michelle Rhee in Washington, basically are to take outsiders and do evaluations. Is that part of this reform?
We will open the door so that local school districts will have the ultimate control. They can come in. We've got a whole information system that we actually worked with folks in the Department of Public Instruction on, and making sure that we have a good, effective system assessing what happens with our students so that we have a good basis of information in the state. But ultimately, we empower school districts to be able to pay for performance, to set up systems, to work with their employees as partners in the education system instead of having things dictated through the collective bargaining process. So it's really an expensive entitlement. It's not a right, because if it was a right, obviously the federal government would have it, and they don't.
So as local school districts renegotiate their contracts with teachers, all of these things will now be up for negotiation in a way that they never were before.
Well, they'll not be negotiated, they'll be up for setting a process. Really, the only thing left for true collective bargaining is the base salary, and even that's capped at the CPI. Everything else won't be through a collective bargaining process. It'll be through superintendents, school board members, principals, teachers, parents, supporters ultimately coming together and putting together a policy that says what's in the best interest of our schools, of our kids, and having a great education system. They won't have anything dictated to them.
Now, I guess the ultimate test of whether or not you've succeeded will be whether the economy of Wisconsin creates enough jobs. I was looking at the Tax Foundation website, which is a nonpartisan outfit, and they basically said you still got in Wisconsin the 40th business tax climate in the country. You still got something like the 7th highest income tax rate at 7.75%. Do you have any plans to do anything about that tax burden?
Yeah, our overall budget that we just passed a week ago that I'll be signing in about a week or so before June 30th actually has a net reduction in taxes overall. It freezes property taxes. In fact, in some school districts like Wauwatosa, where my 2 kids go to public schools, they're actually going to see an actual reduction in the tax
levy. That's in the property tax.
In the property tax.
That's not the state income tax.
No, but in our state that's important because we have some of the highest property taxes in the country. We're creeping back on that. This budget doesn't cut the income tax, although that's something we would like to do in the future to further stimulate the economy. But for us, some of those rankings you talk about are from 2010, where my predecessor obviously raised taxes. We've actually seen our rankings in the recent survey of chief executives from across the country go from 41 up to 24 in terms of business-friendly states. And probably the most impressive statistic for us is just a few weeks ago, the statewide chamber did their annual survey of executives, job creators from across Wisconsin, and a year ago, 10% of them said we were in the right direction. As of this last survey a couple of weeks ago, 88% of the job creators said, in our state at least, we were going in the right direction, and a majority of them said they're going to add jobs. That's the real test. Got to have more jobs.
All right, let's talk about the recalls, which are going to happen. 6 of the Republicans in the state Senate are up for a recall on August 9th. That's not too long from now.
That's right.
And there's going to be a lot of money thrown in. What's your strategy by the Democrats and the unions to essentially overturn your majority and say, look, they voted for this, and now we show that there's negative consequences?
Yeah, they basically said they're going to punish these folks just like they tried to punish the Supreme Court justice and use that as a referendum.
And they lost that race.
They lost. Well, it was close, but they lost.
What's your strategy to counter that?
Well, they're going to put 20 to 25 million in. That is a remarkable number. I spent $13 million statewide in a gubernatorial race. This is 20 to 25 million potentially on a series of 9 6, as you mentioned, Republicans, 3 state senators, though, try and defend on the Democrat side. Our strategy is to try and get our message out. It's going to be a series of things, certainly helping candidates out. The party's going to come in. Others, I would imagine, are going to try and come in and help balance that out. I believe if we get close, we don't have to have matched dollar for dollar, but if we get close so we can get an equal playing field when it comes to an echo chamber, I think we'll win. Because as every day, every week, and every month has gone by, more and more people in our state realize this was a good thing to do. More and more stories come out about how school districts are pulling back on layoffs, how they're protecting middle-class jobs, how middle-class property taxpayers are actually going to see their property taxes frozen, how they're seeing the economy improve. 25,000 new jobs this year, 11,500 of those jobs in manufacturing. All those things setting the table for people seeing it was successful.
Right, but the other side is really, really motivated.
They are.
And I think I saw your approval rating was with among Democrats about 9%. So how do you get your voters as motivated, because they're saying, hey, we won. You know, it's easier to get angry about something when you lost than it is to protect something where you had a victory.
Well, and I think you saw in the Supreme Court race, a month out from that election, the Supreme Court incumbent, David Prosser, I think by any measure was likely to have lost that election. Because you had one side that was motivated. They were going to try and punish people by electing someone to take his place. A month later, enough people in the electorate in Wisconsin woke up and said, you know, that's not the way to elect a Supreme Court justice. I think in the same way, people across Wisconsin are not only going to realize what we've done has been effective, it's helped turn around the economy, but I also think in a recall election, they're going to say one vote, recall should be about one vote. If anything, they should be about misconduct of office, and if anybody could make the case for that, it would be those running against those 3 Democrats who left the state for 3 weeks. You know, if you make the case, just think about it. If you work at a factory and you left your job for 3 weeks without approval,
you'd be out of the job.
You'd be terminated.
All right. Governor Walker, thanks so much for being here.
Good to be with you.